There. Thanks very much for checking out my YouTube video. I do greatly appreciate it. So we're coming up to, well, a little past a week on my last video. So basically, I thought I'd do a little update and kind of tell you what's going on with Turo. So what have I been up to? Well, I've been on the hunt to cover my butt for taxes. So this is one of those things where Turo sent out a little, invitation to sit down with someone from H&R Block, kind of just doing a little live presentation on the Turo platform. And I thought to myself, that's not a bad idea. I've had some businesses in the past and I've experienced an audit. So actually a couple of them. So they're never fun, number one. And you're never really too sure exactly where you're at with it, because a lot of small businesses or little independent guys that are working, the side hustle, decide to do their own taxes, and that can be problematic, or you're using tax software. So I thought, well, you know what, to save the issue, let's go out and hunt down a good accountant or a good bookkeeper. And so that's been the process this week. I sat down with my little AI bot, which I'm using the phone right now to record on, as well as I'm using the live camera. So I've noticed that some of the live stuff, record quality is a little bit lacking in that regard. So I thought, well, I'll do a backup shot with the camera, with the phone, and we'll go from there. So I might upload the phone copy, and I might keep the live copy as well. So again, at some point, I want to edit this down into podcast content, which is why I'm really focused on audio and not really focused on the YouTube end of it. So I do apologize for that, but I'm trying to keep content rich, and I'm trying to just be able to just tell you what's going on and go from there. So let's talk about Turo. A little side note, if you could subscribe, that would be great. Or if you could leave a comment, I would love that too. Or if you put a little thumbs up, it helps with the algorithm. So at some point, maybe I can get some advertising. With advertising can come new equipment, maybe a better camera, or perhaps a studio space. Right now, you're in my 3D printer space. So this is where I do my little crafting and work in the back, and I make tractor parts for what to describe. Well, during COVID, I was actually making some pretty big tractor parts, things for dealers that couldn't get components readily available because unfortunately there were some distribution issues. So they'd come in, they'd say, hey, I need an airbox, or I need this made. And I would make it pretty easy. I have a little 3D scanner. I'd scan the product, kind of tinker with a little bit to make sure it fits properly, and then I would go ahead. So you're in my studio space for 3D printing, and I do paint, and I do Canadiana. So I do little trains, and I do a bunch of stuff. So just things that I like. Again, hobbies, right? Keeps you occupied. They probably do drive you insane, or they don't. I don't know. So we'll go from there. So with that said, little sidetrack, we'll go back to Turo. So I'm up to 2 cars. I've got the Cruze is now on post for Turo, so it's up for rent. Oddly enough, it's in the mid 40s as far as the daily rental is concerned. I leave automated pricing on, which is just the easiest way to do it. And then they've set it at like $43 and $47. My Outlander, which right now is set at 57 to 68. So really the cost to rent in comparison is on the mid-size or the compact car, at least in my market, is fairly close to a 7-passenger SUV. So I thought that was kind of odd as far as that's concerned. So I either think that maybe Turo doesn't quite get the idea of what my Outlander is, and then when I do the comps on it, it comes up and says it's comparable to a Nissan Rogue or a Hyundai Santa Fe, and it's quite a bit bigger than those. And again, you have that third row to it, so I'm thinking they've got it categorized wrong. But I'm going to send them off a little, hey, what's going on? Is this right? And we'll go from there. Again, I'm on that 6-month run with it, so I'm trying to keep it automated. I'm going to see, and my initial goal on that is to pay the taxes, take care of the maintenance cost, pay down some of the depreciation in that 6-month period. being a used car, being 10 years, the depreciation really isn't that big of a factor for me. But it's that initial cost. So I basically want to be able to wash that out and go, okay, was this Turo experience worthwhile, or wasn't it, right? From that standpoint. If I go, okay, the taxes have been covered and the basic maintenance and the tires I bought for it are covered, and my insurance is it's covered. I don't have to worry about it. It's one of those things where I'm going to go, okay, well, even if the profit is at zero, I'll keep doing it for another 6 months and we'll review then. And then we can kind of say, okay, well, we've eaten down some of the cost of the vehicle. In other words, I did have to buy it. I had to pay money for it. So if we come back in the year and we go, oh, I made $4,000 on that car and I spent 11 on it. And I'm going to go, okay, well, again, I'm doing total cost. So 11 change was with taxes and the safety and everything in it. So really at that point I could get out of the vehicle if I wanted to. And I'd probably be able to say, okay, if I sold it and the vehicle's nice and clean and tidy, I might be able to get a little bit of profit off that. But to be honest with you, it'd probably be a break-even point, right? So in other words, my thought on this one is probably 18 months to 2 years to really see anything that would kind of what you'd consider to be of value, right? From that standpoint. So that I'm pretty grounded in that. Whereas when I look at some of the other guys that are on Turo, they kind of go, oh, I want to get this paid off in 6 months. And maybe if I was in the GTA or a big city central or parked right beside an airport, maybe that would be something I could aim for and say, okay, well, that would cover it. But I don't think it, in my area, I'm going on a 14-day rental per month is kind of the goal. So far, I've managed to match that on the Mitsubishi product. It's been doing okay. A little bit of a lull right now, but I think that's, at least when I'm looking at the comparables, it looks like there's a lot available, which means normally when I look at comparables, at least the last couple months, I would see 8 to maybe 4. So it means it is what it is. And then I'm looking now and it's like 16 to 24. And they're not new Turo operators. They've got 25 rentals already out. They've been on for a couple of years. So clearly there's a slowdown right now. Might pick up in December with the holidays. Who knows? I don't know. But again, the goal here is I figure it'll be quiet January, December anyway. So, but the goal essentially at this point is just to kind of keep it booked for those 14 days. So far, we've been doing that, which is fine. On the surprise car that I didn't intend to really pick up, but because it was local and because the price was reasonable and the fellow seemed to be pretty legitimate and the car's condition was, it needed some work, but it wasn't something that was going to require a lot of shop time. I didn't have to pay out of pocket for it. I had to pay for parts. I had to do the work myself. It took a couple weekends, and it was a gamble. In other words, the car was making some engine noise and had some issues, and it could have been a big job, and it did turn out to be an intake. So no big deal. It's pretty easy from that standpoint. Turned out to be some other things like brakes and a couple little items, but again, stuff that typically isn't going to, be something that's going to be, how would I put this? I didn't have to pay for an engine, right? So I'm happy about that. Didn't have to pay for a transmission. Happy about that. All that stuff seems nice and solid. I had to pay for basic maintenance. I'm going to use those components up in the next 6 months. Well, not completely, but the new brakes are going to last at least a year, I'm going to assume. That intake I put onto it was the whole intake system. It's probably going to last at the end of life on that car. So again, just something along that line. Doing temperature sensor right on the top of the engine. Again, a couple weekends, not a big deal, right? So that car I'm pretty happy with as far as that's concerned. We're going to see how it will do over the next 6 months. And again, that was just one of those things where inadvertently I found it, right? So I'm thinking it's going to go pretty quick just because of the price point. And the other one is when I look at comparables on it, there's maybe 15 cars out there. And when you're shopping for a midsize or a compact car, at least what I've found in the past, it's just a Band-Aid to get you through for a little while. So it's going to probably be a weekend or a week rental. I've talked to a couple of folks at work who have issues with getting rental cars, and they're coming in from Kitchener. So I'll probably end up getting like a 3 or 4 day through the week booking because people are commuting back and forth to come to work, right? So it's just the nature of it. It's not going to be a wedding car. It's not going to be somebody joyriding it because they've always dreamed of owning a Cruze. It's going to be, I need a car. I need an automatic air conditioning, power windows, power locks. I need a car that looks okay, drives okay, gets me decent fuel mileage, isn't going to break the bank, and it's a consumable. You're going to forget about it as soon as you drop the keys back to me. Like that. That's essentially what that car is. Same thing with the Mitsubishi. They're not exotics. But now that I'm into that second or third month, I started thinking to myself, well, I got to think 6 months down the road or a year down the road, and April's coming up. Um, boom, it'll be here, and I'm going to probably have to pay taxes. Like that's just the nature of it, right? So in Canada is a wonderful world that we're in, at least where I'm at. Taxes are just are what they are. Now I've had some small businesses in the past, and I've been audited. Never fun. So it's one of those things where if you go out and get yourself an accountant or a bookkeeper before there's an issue, probably not a bad idea. And if you acknowledge the fact and say, you know what, I'm not the numbers guy. Like I can look at a bill and go, okay, that's that. I paid this. I paid that. I know what a profit is. I know what a loss is. I know what a rate of return is. Like I get all that, but I'm not a tax expert. So let's find an accountant. So I sent off a little email, and I don't have any software at this point to be able to show you the screen. So I basically asked my little AI assistant to draft up a little letter and say, hey guys, I'm looking for assistance with preparing my taxes, specifically related to income earned through Turo, a car sharing platform. My situation involves reporting rental or self-employment income, and I want to ensure my obligations and deductions are properly handled, right? So I want to get that all out of the way. And I asked a few questions. I said, here we have a few questions to help me determine if your services are a good fit. And I don't think I have anything overly complicated. I've got a regular job. I got a T4 from that. I'll get paperwork from Turo as far as what I've got. So really, it's just a matter of me holding on to receipts to be able to say, hey, I did buy a bottle of this. I did do that. I put gas in the car, things along that line. So I can do the day-to-day stuff. I'm not illiterate from that standpoint. But the questions I asked is, have you worked with clients who've earned income through Turo or a similar platform? In other words, gig workers is what I'm looking for, someone who's had that background. Do you specialize in rental income or self-employment income? Are you familiar with claims related to vehicle expenses such as depreciation, insurance, and maintenance? I want someone that's got a little bit of a background there. I'm not looking for a corporate accountant because I'm not at that level yet. I'm looking for someone that's, maybe we've got 10, 15 years in the business and they're growing. Yeah, Keith, I've had the occasional self-employed, easy one to handle. Not a big thing from that standpoint. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. And I'm not looking to shave anything off or, put in an overabundance of deductions. I just want a nice, clean, easy book that I can hand off to taxes and say, look, I do get I do get audited. I can just say, here you go. This is the account that I've used. These are my books. Everything's all accounted for as it should be, right? There should be no headaches. If anything, it'd be minor stuff, right? Again, can you help with maximizing deductions for other relevant expenses like fuel, Turo fees, and advertising? How can you handle capital cost allowances through CCA? Again, as it relates to vehicles, I'm going to be looking at writing down a car with depreciation and kilometer use, right? So those are numbers I don't really necessarily know, but an accountant would, right? Can you assist with HST registration? So in Canada, if I work as a gig worker or I work independently and I make less than $30,000, I don't have to register as a business really in Canada. It's a good idea too, but you don't need to, right? Still have to collect HST and remit it. Like it's still an issue, but it comes at the end of the year. Again, I could be wrong on that. My accountant might say, hey, Keith, you're an idiot. It wouldn't be the first time, right? Go register your business as this and get it done. But I want to be able to say, hey, I did that based on that advice, an actual accountant, for an actual bookkeeper. So we'll go from there, right? Because we're just starting. We're only a couple months into it. So I can play catch up for like the 90 days. It's not a big deal from that standpoint. I haven't made a bazillion dollars. So it's not like I can say, hey, here it is. Here's my huge income. In fact, if anything, I'm behind the 8 ball on a few things, right? As far as bought the car, I haven't paid it off yet, right? So I'm still working with numbers. So it's not a hurdling point from that point, but I don't want to be 2 years out and go, I've got to backtrack and go, oh my God, should I have filed taxes? Yeah, of course you should have, right? So that's why it's important to get a bookkeeper and accountant. Again, I asked, do you provide guidance in calculating input taxes? And basically what I want to be able to say is, you know what? I don't want to sit there with a software program. I don't want to be there just answering questions. I want to be able to talk to an actual person and say, hey, Bill, my accountant, I'm assuming his name is Bill for now. Could be Sarah. Who knows? Is this right? You can punch it in your computer, but I want to make sure that we're doing it properly. And then I want to ask about fees. So what are they going to charge me to prepare the taxes? What else is involved? So in other words, if they're going to say, look, we want to charge you $150 to prepare the taxes. We want to charge you $50 a month for bookkeeping and basic services, which I think based on what I've been researching is pretty normal. Like there usually is a monthly component attached to it, at least from what I can tell so far. And if they say, and I would be fine with that. Like they came back and said, look, this is a software. You put the numbers in. We check it at the end of the month. We spend half an hour. We charge you out a half-hour billing time. Boom, done. Or if they do it quarterly, it doesn't make a difference from that standpoint, right? I'd sooner pay the couple $100 and then plus tax fee to file than have to put up with chasing my tail 2 or 3 years down the road and saying, oh my God, what happened? Right. So that's basically it. I also looked at, because I do work in a factory, essentially, and I work the night shift, and I do come across the odd occasional import into Canada. So, and strangely enough, if you talk to anybody, at least what I find is that most folks from India have either bookkeeping, accounting, financial background, or they've been in a trade, at least in my realm of the world. Every once in a while you'll find a health professional, but that's pretty unusual as far as the industry I'm in. But to the most part, if I turn to the left and say, is anybody here an accountant or a bookkeeper? It's like hands go up. It is a funny environment. So I might actually get a buddy at work to do the basic bookkeeping. Maybe that's shooting myself in the foot. And then I'll run everything to an accountant. So again, it's one of those things I'm still working out, but it's one of those things I just found fascinating. So apparently, if you're from India and you've managed to make it into Canada, apparently it is fairly common to have an education related to money. Whereas if you're in Canada, at least when I went through high school, there really wasn't an accounting course or how to save or how to make money. They didn't really cover that. So I just thought that was an interesting contrast from that one. The other one I was asking is, do you support throughout the year bookkeeping and questions? So in other words, that's that post-filing stuff. And I would like that. In other words, I need a little bit of guidance, and I'd sooner pay a little bit of money to a professional to say, okay, it's taken care of. And I drafted up an email, and then I ran it through my little AI to clean it up a little bit. So I just said, these are the points. And we sent it off to 7 people in the local area. And I've got 1 response. And again, that's from today. So in other words, it's pretty honest from that standpoint. So I got a response from 1 chartered personal accountant who said they received the inquiry and they don't deal with folks like me, essentially. So that's essentially what it's in between the line. Before I respond to your individual questions, I'd like to clarify we're only accepting corporate clients. And unfortunately, you are not a corporate client, right? So that's understandable. So they don't even specialize in that. So again, this is from a Google search. They just said, give me the top 7 in the area. And again, we've got a small area, so it's probably all 7, right? And at least she was very honest about that, right? So it would have been nice if she said, hey, maybe you should try these folks, they're reasonable. And that brought me to another thing where I thought to myself, you know what? I have an Indeed account. So I went over to Indeed and I did a post. So basically on my Indeed, I said, I'm looking for a local listable area accountant or tax service. I want recommendations or ones to avoid. I would prefer to actually know the ones to avoid because the ratings, I think, online are a little dodgy. And I'd sooner have another business person say, hey, you know what, Keith? I've used this guy over here for 10 years and he's pretty straightforward. No big headaches. A local guy that I can go knock on the door and say, hey, here's a problem, or hey, I got my tax notice, I need to know what to do, right? So that's what I really like is not a boutique, but a little bit of personal service. I don't need the full white glove and a cup of tea. I just need to be able to pop in and say, hey, I understand April's pretty busy. Can we get this stuff done in December? You know what I mean? Like that would be the ideal thing. So essentially I just did a little draft and then I put a little link up with the exact same questions I asked all the accountants. Essentially, can you do this? Can you do that? And I put a little link to my wonderful little YouTube channel because I said self-promotion does work sometimes, right? Along with a pretty picture of myself so that people can say, hey, he's an actual real person, not just some guy trolling to get leads, right? So we'll see how that works from that standpoint. And of course, I also went through AI and let's see. Also went through my AI recommendations, which I think is a great idea if you're on Turo, just to kind of go over and say, hey, what's going on? What price point should I be at? And strangely enough, I find that when I'm going through ChatGTP, I might as well give them a plug, and I do pay them monthly. So I get the extra package, which means you get a little nicer voice, which is debatable. But I will tell you, the voice choices are hilarious. So if you're ever looking at AI and you're going, I'd like to get something that's pretty decent, ChatGTP seems pretty reasonable. And lately, I found in the last month or so, they're getting a little restrictive on things you can ask. So in other words, they won't really give you, they won't be your accountant is what I'm saying. Because I did ask, hey, can you be the AI accountant? And I can just remit my numbers into you, and then at the end of the year, you can generate my taxes. No, it won't do that. So, but I thought if I'm not going to get any service, I might as well get no service, right? So, but then I said, okay, well, draft me up the questions. These are the ones I'm concerned about, and let's do it up, right? So it cleaned it up. So again, if you're out there and you're trying to get yourself a little grounded, and you want to make sure that everything that you're writing is clean and clear and crisp and to the point, run everything through ChatGTP. It makes perfect sense from that standpoint. And it'll also give you a couple little red flags, like say, hey, going rate is $150 on average for a small business to remit their taxes. That's what an accountant would normally charge you if it's literally you're dropping your little blue book and you're saying this is it. Then they're going to charge you some money for taking the information from your little blue book or your ledger, which is dates me. They're going to charge you for inputting that information into their system. So you're going to want to get a software package that you can remit everything in and say, okay, well, here it is. I've transferred everything over to you. So now it's just a point click. You're good. And then hopefully that spreadsheet you've created or whatever software you've decided to use. And ChatGTP gave me a bunch of recommendations from that standpoint. From there, then it would be a matter of just going, okay, we're inputting line this to this to this to this, and it's easy, right? So again, it's something to think about when you're looking at the cost. I want a little more hand holding. I want to be able to say, hey, I've added in my monthly, or this is my quarterly review. Please make sure everything is correct and accurate, and maybe I've missed something. And if I haven't missed something, perfect, like ideal. That's what I would like. Come back and say, hey, you're good from that standpoint. So that's what I've been doing this week, has been hunting around for an accountant or bookkeeper from that standpoint. I also checked online, and strangely enough, I can hire a bookkeeper in India because, again, I've got Indian folks at work, and they all seem pretty honest and legitimate and friendly and cheerful. I thought, okay. And in India, I could go to BDO, which is a very high-end service here in Canada. and I could pay an Indian rate for getting my taxes done. And strangely enough, they would port that to a BDO office in Ontario. And then they would just basically say, hey, you know what, we're going to do Skype. We're going to go through your books. You're going to input, as we're doing it, and we're going to make sure everything's okay. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to get a bill from an Indian accountant or an Indian bookkeeper. And strangely enough, their rates are substantially cheaper in comparison to what I could get here. The dilemma I'm looking at is, am I getting anything? Is it cheaper, as in because I'm getting a cheaper service and it's not going to be able to fulfill what I need to get done? So it's one of those things where I'm curious about it, but I haven't been able to find anybody to be able to say, hey, Keith, yeah, I do that with my business, or I do this with my bookkeeper is in India or overseas. And yes, they're tied to a Canadian company and they just change back and forth. Then I thought to myself, well, if I ran a bookkeeping or an accounting service, and again, because I got that decline, or not decline, but basically we don't cater to you, which I understand, certain markets, right? But I'm surprised they wouldn't go, you know what? We can quarterback or coach you, but we outsource, which you would think would be a way of capturing a little bit more of the market. I don't know if you really need to, but be able to say, hey, you know what? Now we can have a two-tier business, right? Be able to say, look, no, we're just basically overseeing and stamping it and making sure everything's good, or you end up saving time. I would think like it's numbers. It's not. I don't know if it's overly creative. I'm not a bookkeeper or account, so I don't know if it is something you look at. You kind of go, no, it's a dream job. Like maybe it is. Like I don't know, or maybe it's just numbers. I have no idea. So that would be interesting. So hopefully I end up getting a nice local accountant or a good bookkeeper to work with and going from there. So that's what I've been up to. The other one, I'm still waiting on an insurance quote. So I think she's still working away on it. She sent me one email and she said she's still plugging away. So I don't know what that means to me. But again, January's coming up pretty quick. So that's when I've got to look at the renewal time. So I can either switch out of my current broker and my current company and go to a new one, which case I'm looking at probably a jump next year. And they've already made that clear. They just haven't said how much. And most people that I've been talking to say it's 30% easy. So maybe it's more. I have no idea. And that's very frustrating from that standpoint. So again, if they just said, hey, Keith, you're going up 40%, I go, okay, well, I guess I got to deal with it. It's across the board. It is what it is. I can't self-insure yet. No, I can't self-insure. But that would be, if you had enough money, would you really self-insure? Like, no, I don't think you would. It wouldn't make any sense. So that's where I'm at with that. So that's project is still underway. I've been driving the Cruze a little bit. I've been trying to get the check engine light to trigger. So far, it hasn't happened. Well, actually, check engine light did go on once. I went to a not a U-Serve, a full service gas station, and they didn't tighten the thing on there, which the gas cap, and that caused the check engine light to come on. So I had to pull the OB2 code reader, and it was like, oh, well, that's an easy code to address. Click, click, click. Right. So far, I've put a good run out to Owen Sound. Got some good country roads and got some good, up to 85, 90 kilometers an hour, consistently with no problems. I like to be able to run it down to Kitchener at some point, hit the 401, and really get up to that 110 range for 40 minutes or so, and just make sure the car is good. But so far, I think it's been pretty decent. I don't have any real complaints about that. The snow tires, they're already on. Strangely enough, they're not as loud as I thought they would be. You can still hear them, but they're not horrible as far as snow tires are concerned. Nice thing is that they came with steel wheels, and the steel wheels are actually off of a Cruze. So hubcap's bolted right on. So that was kind of a bonus from that standpoint. So cosmetically, it looks nice. Whereas the Outlander, I switched over snow tires because the summer tires are on an alloyed wheel. The winters are on a steel wheel. The steel wheel just looks, it's just a black wheel. Like it looks sad. So I tried to go get some hubcaps for it. Rare oddity in Southern Ontario is a 17-inch hubcap. And I went to Walmart, picked up a set, and they were the only ones I could find locally. And as soon as I snapped them in place, it was almost as if they dissolved into nothing. So they just cracked to bits. So I think it was either old stock or the resin they use in the plastic is so cheap that it's brittle and maybe just wrong application. So I took them back, and Walmart, of course, did the refund. So it wasn't a big deal from that standpoint. It's more of an annoyance. So come weekend, I may make a trip out to Woodstock. There's a U pull-it yard, and I've been checking online, and it looks like that 17-inch Chrysler minivan hubcap would probably fit on there and just do it fine, right? And they're just plain Jane gray hubcaps, so nothing really to write home about, but at least it would make it look like you wouldn't go, hey, there's a car without dressing, right? Because it does stick out a little bit. So I just want to get a nice hubcap on there that just make the vehicle look neutral, and no one will really notice it. It'll be like, okay, that's fine. And strangely enough, it rides better. So I was running 18s with a little more of a narrow tire. Well, not a narrow tire. The depth is a little lower. So these snow tires are a little thicker. So there's a little more air in that. So it cushions the ride a little bit. So up along 86 here, it's been under construction. So it's got these ruts in the road and some little bits and pieces. That was really noticeable when you're driving it with the alloys, and put the snow tires on. It's like driving an old Lincoln. It just floats. So that's kind of nice. So I don't know if that's a gold star moment for a renter where they'll go, oh, geez, that's special. But again, we're meant to get some good snow over the next week, so it'd be a nice test from that standpoint. I think because I'm so close to folks in Owen Sound, well, I'm not hardly close, but in my region, I'm going to assume that they're not going towards Toronto, they're going north. And I wanted to put snow tires on because it adds an increase to safety, and it's just one of those things that I feel is good value. And plus, it makes it a little more comfortable for me. So when I'm driving the cars, I prefer snow tires. Jag went into storage, so it's gone for a little while, probably the next 3 months, maybe 4 months. Sometimes we get a little Chinook, so every once in a while we'll get a week where it's like, oh, +7, +12, and I'll take it out then to kind of free up the brakes and get everything moving. Getting it ready for storage. Maybe we'll do a video on that. I don't really spend a lot of time on it. I basically give it a nice coat of wax, get it oil sprayed. When it comes to brakes, I bought the coated rotors for it, so they usually just get a little surface rust. So when I take it in for the alignment check, I usually get them to clean the rotors, or I'll pull them off and clean them myself. So it's one of those things where not a big deal from that standpoint. And it's essentially a Ford underneath, so it doesn't really need anything special. It's not like a high-end exotic car where I've got to worry about draining fluids and getting it all ready from that standpoint. It's good to sit in a cold room. No big deal. It's not going to hurt it. So we're coming up past 30 minutes. I like to keep these around the 30-minute mark. Again, at some point, I'm going to edit this out, and I'm going to use bits and pieces of it to create a podcast. And again, I do apologize because I am using a relatively inexpensive webcam. It's from my PlayStation 3 days. Hey, looks pretty good. And I use a local internet service, which essentially is, because I'm on a rural area, it's dodgy. So sometimes you get that whole grain and pixelated thing, which just makes it look like I'm traveling back in time. So you have to deal with that. So normally what I say is go do something else. You can listen to me mutter on and talk about Turo and my little ventures off. So that's where we're at. So again, if you can subscribe, that would be great. PBS moment, it would be wonderful. It'd be nice to get that up. Though I am surprised, I'm at 275, which I think is pretty good, but it's been sitting solid. So maybe I've hit all 275 people in Canada that are interested in Turo. So we'll go from there. So again, see you next week, and I'll try and do some things in the car in the next couple of days as well, and we'll go from there. Have a pleasant and enjoyable day. To end screen and end, and then we're going to go down here.